So, I'm back with my second episode of the list of best and worst for 2020. So today we're going to talk about the worst books that I read in 2020. Before we go into that, I just have a couple of things that I want to say. I don't know exactly why, who started it, how it all came about, but one of our community members, Gavin from How to Train Your Gavin, put together a video that was the same as this one, the worst books of 2020, and it seemed to spark a big drama over on book Twitter. I am not going to speak to whether or not it's okay or not okay. That is entirely up to you individually, whether you like to watch these sorts of videos or not. Perversely, I wasn't going to do one of these, and then I saw all the drama, and oddly enough, it made me want to do one. Having said that, I would like to just really impress how much these opinions are my opinions. If I'm talking about a book that you really love, please don't get offended. It's just my opinion. We can't all like the same stuff. I'm sure when you watched my favourite TV shows and movies yesterday, you didn't necessarily agree with me. I'm sure when you watch my top 10 books of 2020 tomorrow, you won't necessarily agree with me. So you won't necessarily agree with me here. But like I said, it's just my opinion. You're entitled to yours. I'm entitled to mine. Anyway, all that out of the way, let's talk about the books that I didn't like. So I haven't actually ordered these in any particular order. I do have 3 books, well, one's actually a series, but anyway, that I just didn't like for whatever reason. I have 1 book that was quite disappointing, and I have 2 books that I wouldn't say I didn't like. I just don't really understand them. I found them really hard to read, and I kind of came away feeling like, what on earth did I just read? So it's not that I don't like them necessarily, it's maybe just that I'm not clever enough to really know what I read. So anyway, let's start out with the books that I just didn't really like. So the first of these is a book called Not Meeting Mr. Right by Anita Heiss. I read this back in February. It just didn't do it for me. I didn't particularly enjoy the writing style. I thought the characters were quite one-dimensional. So the main character was sort of having trouble finding Mr. Right, finding a man, so she decided that she was going to go out and not worry about it and just find people that would be Mr. Right now, basically. That was kind of all that we were able to know about her for the most part. There were some interesting conversations around Aboriginal issues within our society, Australian Aboriginal issues within our society, that could have been really interesting if they'd been explored further, but they were kind of just slipped in as an aside, almost as a way of saying there's more to this character than we're currently able to know. But then it wasn't fleshed out at all, it wasn't given any real airtime, so the character felt very one-dimensional, and that's just not something that I really appreciate. I like my characters to feel like they are real, genuine people. She also was really not very likable, which again is fine, because usually when a character's fleshed out well, and more than one-dimensional, even if there's a lot of aspects of their personality you don't like, there's usually some kind of redeeming feature, or you can understand where they're coming from. In this particular instance, I just didn't feel like the character was fleshed out enough that I was able to get past those unlikable traits. I've read some other Anita Heiss books this year as well. Definitely liked those more than I liked Not Meeting Mr. Right, but I'm not sure that Anita Heiss's writing style is really for me. I wouldn't say she's all exposition, but definitely more show rather than tell rather than show, which is not something I particularly appreciate. So yeah, reading her books though has actually made me realize how important writing style is to me. So more so even the characterization, although characters are very important to me, definitely more so than plot. If something I feel is not written to my taste or not particularly well constructed, I tend to find it difficult to watch, or difficult to read, I should say. So yeah, so that was the first one. Then we have a book which Connor will not be at all surprised about, but he might be a little bit sad about, and that is Cradle and All by James Patterson. This might belong more in the what on earth did I just read category, but the reason why I ended up saying that I just really didn't like it is because you go through the whole book and it's kind of feels a little bit like I'm not quite sure what's going on, and I ended up getting to the end of the book and feeling like I'm not sure what the point of the entire book was or what James Patterson was trying to say in the book. And then in the last chapter, it might even have been an epilogue, he did something that made the entire rest of the book, which granted wasn't super long, but still, the entire rest of the book, except for those like 4 pages or something, feel like the foreword of a book rather than the book. Maybe it has got a sequel, I don't know, but it felt like it was all a lead up to something, and then this last chapter happened and then it changed everything about what the story meant, but didn't then explain anything that really happened. So that really frustrated me. I don't mind a story where you think things are happening in a certain way and then all of a sudden things get flipped on their head and things are not what they seemed at all. In fact, I quite like that when it's done well. I didn't think this was done well. It was too sudden, it was too far to the end of the book, and I really felt like it left me just kind of feeling like the entire rest of the book, instead of feeling like, oh, that put things in a new perspective, so maybe that means something different. I just felt like saying, well, what the hell was the point of reading that book? That's not a feeling you want to have when you've just spent however long you spent reading the book. So I was really disappointed by this book. I was really let down by this book. I mean, the writing style was fine, the characterization was fine. Up until then, it was fine. So it wasn't like I was absolutely loving it and then I was really disappointed. I was liking it fine, and then I was really disappointed, so then I really didn't like it. Now we come to the series which I think you're all going to hate me for, so sorry everybody. This is a series that is very beloved on booktube. I'm sure that if you've been around for any length of time, you know what I'm going to say, and that is The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. I'm sorry guys, I tried. I really did. I read the first 3.5 books of The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare, and then I DNF'd, and I have no intention of reading The Mortal Instruments ever again. Don't know if I'll bother going back to Cassandra Clare, but I could be talked into it, but I'm not going back to The Mortal Instruments. However, I did quite like the Infernal Devices, so like I said, I could be talked into going back to Cassandra Clare, maybe some of her later stuff. What was my problem with The Mortal Instruments? Where to start? You know how I just said that writing style and good book construction is important to me? That's my problem here. That's my main problem here. I feel like Cassandra Clare really needed an editor to help her with her books. I liked the idea of The Mortal Instruments. I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I love Angel. I really enjoyed Dark Angel. That's showing my age. I really like Supernatural. I quite enjoyed the Vampire Diaries. There are a lot of different things that I like that is to do with urban fantasy, paranormal, supernatural. So realistically, I probably should have liked this series of books, but Cassandra Clare overwrites. She gives you a description and then she gives you another description and then she gives you another description for the same thing. And I just found myself being really frustrated that I couldn't just read the story because there was just so much unnecessary description in the story. And I felt like it was really pulling me out of the storyline and getting enjoyment out of the story. Now don't get me wrong, I actually really like flowery purple prose. Night Circus, loved it. Starless Sea, weird, but loved it. It's not that, it's the repetition of descriptions that do nothing for the enjoyment, that do nothing for the overarching storyline, that do nothing to further the character's interest. It's like she thought we were kind of dumb and she needed to make sure that we really knew what she was describing. And I don't really like being spoken down to. And that's how I felt. And it was frustrating. I had been told by Connor, she wrote the first 3 books and then she had a break of about 5 years, and then she wrote the Infernal Devices and the next 3 books of the Shadowhunter of the Mortal Instruments series, book for book, and we were both hoping that some of that stuff would have been fixed, and I think that it was, but that leads me into my next problem with the Mortal Instruments, and that is that I just couldn't stand Jason Clary. I quite like Simon. Izzy's fine. Alec and Magnus, if they'd had more of them, that would have been great. Jason Clary, just so much angst for no reason. Now, what that's got me thinking and wondering is, am I too old for these books? I'm 40. Is Cassandra Clare actually the only young adult author who is capable of creating a genuine teenage character? And do I just not like teenagers? Because if that's the case, then, you know, actually, props to her, and I should take a lot of this back. But Jason Clary were just... They did the whole forlorn, shouldn't be together, star-crossed lovers thing. In the first 3 books, that was fine. We kind of understood why. It's not a trait that I'm super... trope, I should say, that I'm super much of a fan of, but it's fine. Like most tropes, particularly when it comes to romance, when it's done well, it's, you know, it's fine, and it can be even good. But in the first 3, it was understandable, even though it was, to my opinion, incredibly obvious what was going to happen. But then when it started again in the 4th book, for no reason, I just couldn't. I just had to stop. So that's my Cassandra Clare rant. Once again, I apologise. Probably I should have said, if I put my hand up and when I put it down, I'm still talking about Cassandra Clare. I'm going to see if I can figure out the whole timestamp thing, in which case it will be somewhere here when you can start and stop watching if you don't want to be incredibly offended by my opinions of Cassandra Clare. But anyway, I'm moving on now, so that's enough. Now I'm going to tell you the 2 books that I read that I honestly just think I wasn't smart enough to understand and therefore didn't enjoy. So those 2 were Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, and This Is How You Lose the Time War by 2 authors whose names I have forgotten, so there will be an image of the book somewhere and it'll have the authors on there. So Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is about Hunter S. Thompson, who was a journalist who did all sorts of crazy things and wrote about them, and it is basically a drug-fueled, insane kamikaze mission in Las Vegas over a weekend with his lawyer / drug dealer. I really felt like I didn't quite know what on earth was going on, and I got to the end of the book and I was like, what did I just read? Seriously, what was that? Partly I think that is due to it being quite stream of consciousness, which I'm not a super fan of that style. Partly it was because I genuinely think that Hunter S. Thompson was writing a lot of the book while he was very high. Yeah, I just don't know that I'm the correct audience for that book, so... And then This Is How You Lose the Time War. I definitely can understand why that book would be considered very well written. I can definitely understand why people would find this book amazing. I didn't understand almost a single word that I read. I actually started reading it, then I listened to it because I was like, I don't know what on earth I'm reading. Maybe listening to it might help. It did help a little bit, but I still honestly, I just didn't get what was going on. I kind of understood the very bare minimum of the storyline, but I don't even know that I can explain it to anyone properly, so yeah. If you can explain the book to me, can you please comment below and do so? That'd be amazing. Thank you. So the final book that I want to talk to you about is the book that I was disappointed by. I didn't dislike it, and I definitely can see why it was everyone's favourite book in 2019, but I just found that it didn't live up to that hype for me. And that book is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, this isn't a case of me not liking the book. This is a case of me just not thinking it lived up to the hype. for anyone that doesn't know, Daisy Jones and the Six is written in interview format, and it is about a fictional band in the 70s and their lead singer, Daisy Jones. So that format sounds interesting, and I definitely respect what Taylor Jenkins Reid was trying to do, but it didn't really work that well for me. So the first reason why it didn't work very well for me was I feel like it was too long, particularly the middle section, because it's written in interview format, and I actually listened to it on audiobook because I'd heard a lot of people say I should do that. It was very angsty. There was a lot of people complaining about their lot in life and the situation and what was going on, because it was cast as though, you know, it had a full cast, and that was done really well, but it just felt like people were just whinging at me, and I kind of got a bit tired of it, and I was a bit like, come on, just hurry up, just get to the point. I continued listening to it and listened to it all. I probably should have DNF'd it because I just kept waiting for it to get better. And like I said, it wasn't that I disliked it, there was too much character and not enough plot, which is very unusual for me to say, but because it was very much complaining, I just was kind of bored, really. The other thing that I found difficult, and this is opposite to what I've heard a lot of people say, and that is that it wasn't about a real band. So I've heard a lot of people say that one of the things they love about it is that it really makes you feel like you're listening to some kind of maybe MTV special about a band or something like that. It made you feel like you were hearing about an actual real band. I found the opposite. I found that I was disengaged because I knew that it wasn't a real band. The band itself was likened to Fleetwood Mac. If it had have been a documentary or a book even written in interview format, which was actual interviews with Fleetwood Mac, I would have really, really enjoyed that because it's a band I actually like. So I found the fact that I didn't have that connection to something real took away from my enjoyment of it in a way that apparently other people found more engaging. So I'm not really sure what that says about me or Taylor Jenkins Reid or the book or other people. Probably nothing. It's as any of these things are, it's just your opinion, but yeah, I found that really interesting. So there you go. So anyway, guys, those are all the books that I either didn't like or was confused by or found disappointing in 2020. Overall, I think I've had a really fantastic reading year. I really only have those few books to talk about, and even then, like I said, there was only 3 that I actively didn't like. So I think that's actually pretty amazing. Maybe I'm just been in a good reading mood, but overall I think I've just been reading some great books. Anyway, guys, that's it for the video. If you have any comments that you'd like to make about any of the books that I talked about, if you agree or disagree with any of the opinions that I've expressed in this video, please do comment below. Please keep it kind, but please do comment below because I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.